Years ago, when I was a little partners in crime. This guy, UNOOSA. Good to see you, yes. Okay, so you was.
Yeah. Take seats again, please. This is this session is going to build on that and provide hopefully some additional insights. The first session is going to be a session within a session. So we're going to have a 45-minute session on the GEOSS platform, state of the art and perspectives. And that's going to be coordinated and led by Joost van Bemmelen from European Space Agency. Since 1997, Joost has been at ESA, European Space Agency in Frascati and Esrin. Before that, he was a GI scientist at TNO for almost 10 years. At ESA or Esrin, he works on technological development, GEOSS, hopefully I don't have to explain to anyone, and long-term data preservation. So, over to you, Joost.
Thank you, Stephen. So indeed, my presentation will be regarding the GEOSS platform. And I'm doing this presentation actually on behalf of various players within GEOSS, in particular on behalf of the GEOSS platform operations team and the GEOSS Evolve team. I'd like to call forward as well some of our colleagues. One of them is Ivan Deloach from USGS, Stefano Nativi from the Joint Research Center, Paolo Mazzetti from CNR, and I already have next to me Christoph Waldman, who is representing actually one of the initiatives that's being supported by the GEOSS platform from Atlantos. Gregory Giuliani is not present. He's from the University of Geneva. The seat is a bit low, I see. But okay. Anyway, let me see if this one works. How do I go forward? This does not work. This one, I will try this one. Yes, it does. So the presentation is all about the GEOSS platform moving forward towards discovery, access and use of data, information and knowledge. Of course, I wanted to react a bit to what has been said this morning. I think and I believe that all the people present at the table consider that the zero download idea is really great, and as well, of course, this is something which we fully support, let's say, by the GEOSS platform. We would like to support this in the future. You heard about data cubes, moving users to the data. This is something not only within the GEOSS platform team, but also, of course, and I'm representing as well a bit ESA, we consider important at ESA, machine learning, deep learning, artificial intelligence, Jupyter notebooks, moving towards analysis-ready data. These are all activities that shall be considered, or technological development shall be considered as well by this GEOSS platform. Let's continue. A bit of information regarding the actors. I already introduced my colleagues at the table. As mentioned, this GEOSS platform activity is supported by the GEOSS platform operations team, formerly known as well as the GEOSS common infrastructure team and the GEOSS Evolve team. Main players is what you see here, represented by the logos. I could come back to them later on and inform you a bit more about their roles within this GEOSS platform operations, but also within the GEOSS Evolve team. So I will not elaborate on that now too much. But of course, we as well work together quite a bit with the various GEOSS communities, in particular the regional initiatives like AmeriGEOSS and EuroGEOSS, not only, and users and resource providers. I consider really that without them, we would not have been there where we are today. And then there are as well, of course, various organizations that fund or co-fund the activities. And in particular, I would like to refer to DG RTD, who have been supporting us via the EDGE project. One of the players I'd like to mention in particular anyway is the Geo Secretariat. The Geo Secretariat has always supported as well this GEOSS platform operations, and they're as well, let's say, active within the GEOSS Evolve team. And you can read actually on the slide at the right side, I don't know how small it is, what their activities are. Maybe quickly, just because I'd like to introduce this as one of the first steps that we did within the GEOSS platform. We wanted to ensure that, first of all, data were discoverable and accessible, because without data, you will not arrive to information or to knowledge. So that's the first thing. And the second thing what we wanted to do during this first step is to ensure that as well we had a critical mass of users. So having these two together, the main role, as we see, of the GEOSS platform is as a connector between these two, let's say, groups of stakeholders. So providing connectors, so the GEOSS platform as a connector between the users and the resource providers. Quickly going through a bit of history of the GEOSS platform. You all know that actually at the World Summit of Sustainable Development, there was firstly expressed the need for coordinated observations related to the state of the Earth in 2002 in Johannesburg. Then at the Earth Observation Summit, the first one in Washington, there was an ad hoc GEO already co-chaired by the European Commission, and there was the need expressed for a 10 years implementation plan. Then we started first talking about the group, regarding the Global Earth Observation System of Systems in Tokyo in 2004. In 2005, GEO was established. The first 10 years GEO's implementation plan was actually delivered and defined. The first plenary of GEO was a bit later during that year in Geneva. Then we had in 2008 the GEOSS common infrastructure implemented as a clearinghouse, provided as a component by USGS. This was still together with other components, if I may call it that way. One of them was a standards registry, a component registry, and a services registry. In 2010, we had selected out of 3 portals, the GEOSS portal implemented by ESA, and at that time I think it was still with FAO, or World Food Programme. I'm looking at my colleagues because I was not yet involved, let's say, in GEOSS at that time. In 2012, we had the introduction of the Discovery and Access Broker provided by CNR. A bit later, we had as well the Yellow Pages, which is a component provided by the University of Geneva, and the Status Checker by FGDC, sorry. And then at the end of 2015, we actually had introduced the enhanced GEOSS portal. And with the introduction of these components, we moved from a GCI, from a GEOSS common infrastructure, towards what we call nowadays the GEOSS platform. We have seen as well that during these years, and let's say with the introduction actually of the Discovery and Access Broker, the number of registered resources in the GEOSS platform has grown almost exponentially. You can see that around 2011, 2012, we were at about 1 million resources that were accessible. Nowadays, even we are close to 420, 430 million resources that are accessible already. If you look at the number of queries which are, let's say, placed, so this is not data access, but really queries, you see as well that there has been an exponential growth from about 400,000 in 2014 to more than 7 million in 2018. And I think this is, let's say, really a result of the good work together with between the different actors. I mentioned here as well that we organized from 2016 into 2018 these data provider workshops, and I believe that this interaction with data providers and users has been really instrumental as well to the success of the GEOSS platform that we have seen, at least in the past. So what I mentioned already in the beginning, we really see this GEOSS platform as a connector between users and EO resources. And these EO resources are not only data, even if the focus so far was very much on data, but I consider as well as EO resources, information, knowledge, services, systems. So there is indeed, let's say, this is, by the way, a text which I took from the work program. There is this link between the users on the one hand and the EO resources, but of course it's linking as well the EO resources between themselves and the users between themselves. So if I look at, let's say, another representation of, let's say, the actual situation, on the top still we see the users, and at the bottom we still see the EO resources, then today for each or not today, until recent, for each, let's say, resource with which a user you would like to connect, he had to implement himself, let's say, the connection with those resources. Nowadays, you can go either via a GEOSS platform or any other platform and benefit from connectors or enablers that let's say, connect to the resources, which facilitates actually the work of the users. And that way, as well, this GEOSS platform can make available different connectors. And I will elaborate a bit more on these types of connectors or APIs, widgets, etc. later on. So again, GEOSS platform is connecting users with resources. It is providing interoperability, so it's not enforcing interoperability. We are not telling you you shall all go to Google Earth Engine and just use Google Earth Engine. You can continue using what you are using, and as well the providers can continue using what they're using. The platform should provide actually connectors, if I may call them that way still, that leave, let's say, users and providers to be, let's say, technology agnostic, so they can continue what I said, using whatever they want. What you see as well in the right lower corner is that actually we made the GEOSS platform in such a way that you can use it on different types of devices, on handheld devices, but as well on normal computers, of course. And looking at this figure, I don't know if you can read it anyway, at the left side, it is written that the providers are more upstream, so the resource providers, the GEOSS platform, we see this more in the midstream area, and the downstream, we see the intermediate users, so who can actually elaborate the data either remotely via instrument services provided by the GEOSS platform, or accessible actually via the GEOSS platform, and that way make, again, results available by registering them via the GEOSS platform to final users. Then what are the instruments? I think I already mentioned them a bit. Anyway, the instruments of this GEOSS platform today are the GeoDAP, the GEOSS Portal, Yellow Pages, and the status checker, yes. And sorry, those are the, let's say, the components, and around these instruments, these components, I'd like to see that we make available or offer to the community views that can be used to, let's say, orient or focus on given resources for certain communities. For example, we can have a view for the ocean community, we can have a view for Sustainable Development Goal 1531, we can have a goal for the Paris climate change, we can have, let's say, a view for Sendai disaster risk reduction. But on the other hand, we can as well have views defined by the resource providers if you would like to promote or consider that some of the resources are in a certain area, of course. Then these views can, of course, be used via the GEOSS portal, but as well used via APIs, via widgets, or via what we call mirror sites. And what you see here now is already quite some actors that we connect with, or that are connected actually with resources via the GEOSS platform, I should say it that way. So again, this GEOSS platform is actually only a series of connectors. Very quickly, I would like to go through these instruments. I think I mentioned already most of it. GEOSS View is indeed to orient the whole GEOSS resource to the specialized themes the community is interested in. These are implemented via discovery clauses and/or access clauses. The widgets can be used by let's say, communities who have their own portal and this way interface via their own portal with the GEOSS resources. As mentioned over there, it's an essential feature of GEOSS. It's a lightweight application. They are freely available, of course, and easily configurable. We have mirror sites. These were so far, let's say, initiated and implemented by the GEOSS platform team. The idea is that everyone can implement their own GEOSS mirror site and benefit, let's say, from their own, portal that way, and that way as well interface with different GEOSS instruments, and eventually as well, of course, with the GEOSS resources. And we have the APIs, and here we have different types of APIs. We have APIs for geospatial experts, and we have APIs for web development experts. It's actually a set of standard web service interfaces, for example, based on OGC service interfaces like CCAN, OAI, PMH, FTP, etc., and a set of APIs for software developers, what I mentioned already before, which are, let's say, at the client-side APIs and, for example, high-level JavaScript libraries. Some GEOSS platform numbers. Today we have more than 185 open data catalogs already registered. As I mentioned, more than 420 million data and information resources, access to what I understand, more than 35 languages. There's more than 7,000 contributing organizations. We can do searches using more than 200,000 keywords. And I think that the number on the right side comes from a GRC study. And this regards the year 2018, if I'm not wrong, where more than 15,000 unique IP addresses accesses have been registered or monitored. And out of those, 13% was from academy, 27% industry companies, 20% government, and 33% private organizations, and 7% was actually unknown. Very quickly, something about ongoing developments, and in particular, let's say, something we're doing in the context of EuroGEOSS and in collaboration with EC-funded projects Ecopotential and GeoEssential. And this regards in particular, let's say, evolution towards what I already mentioned at the beginning, discovery, access and use of data sources and knowledge. So on the right side, you see indeed the GEOSS platform is connecting, and via, let's say, the GEOSS platform as well, outside of the GEOSS platform, data, services and knowledge. And I will show you now, let me see a bit more of how it looks like. Yes, in the GEOSS platform, actually nowadays, after you did a search, you can see three icons. So you do normal search, you can see then data results, knowledge results, and service results. Indeed, these data results is based on the search in this more than 185 open data catalogs. The knowledge results are based on searches in various knowledge hubs. For example, Zenodo, Wikipedia, but also in Ecopotential, where you can walk through ecosystems, protected areas, storylines, workflows. We are working, what I mentioned already, on as well, retrieving knowledge from the GeoEssential project, but as well, we have already an implementation for the SDGs from the United Nations Statistic Division. And of course, in case the GEO Knowledge Hub exposes as well APIs which are open and follow standards, we could as well link to that. For services, we can as well scroll and activate services, e.g. starting from a workflow as in Ecopotential or in GeoEssential. So as I mentioned above, if you see there, the knowledge results as well show at the end workflows. These can be activated by selecting data that are registered within the GEOSS platform. Very quickly then, I don't want to call it a short demo. It's more like a mock-up. I mean, if you would like to see a demo, you can go to Guido Colangeli, who's here present as well, who can show you how this is already implemented in the development portal. We could type, for example, land cover change. You can show them after the query has ended, let's say, 3 types of resources. As I said, the upper one is the data resources. Sorry, the data resources results. The second one is the knowledge, and the third one are the services. I will just make it a bit smaller so you can show a bit more. We can show a bit more. And selecting one of, okay, we can go through the filters. You can further filter based on, let's say, of course, the metadata with which the resources are registered. You see still that we have filters based on keyword, format, source, service, health, which is done, of course, via the status checker, organization and protocol. But we can as well do advanced searches, for example, based on geolocation, Earth observation catalogs, thematic areas, but of course as well on date range. I can tell you that we also experimented already with access to data cubes, and for that we already have evolved as well. The interface, it will not, let's say, be put into operations in the next version. But this could be done as well soon in case we agree on that with the different actors. Let's look quickly as well what we can do via knowledge. Clicking on this knowledge one icon, we can show the knowledge results. We can scroll down a bit. We can select, for example, 15.3, achieve land degradation neutrality. And this is actually a target within the Sustainable Development Goals. Clicking on this one, we will open it, and we'll see on the right side actually that there is an arrow via which we can walk through this knowledge actually and go to one of the indicators, because there's only one indicator there. And this is then 53.1. Then, of course, we can go back. We can make it as complicated as we want, or we can make it, let's say, walk through the whole tree of knowledge, let's say, that is being made available by the knowledge provider, of course, no? We can as well look at services. Then we see service results. In this case, you see one of the 2 pages of service results. We open the first one, land cover change. You see again that there is an arrow where you can open this one. You can show the workflow. You can select the inputs to the workflow, and you can activate it via clicking on run if you are logged into the portal, depending, of course, on what is being made available by the provider of the service. Let me see, how much time did I use so far? 20 minutes. I could very quickly go through the GEOSS Evolve initiative. The GEOSS Evolve initiative is what I said, looking at the evolution of not the GEOSS platform, but GEOSS at large, and in particular the architecture at large. No, and the chairs or the co-chairs are Ivan Deloach and Max Kraja. Max Kraja from the Joint Research Center, I would say represented by Stefano Nativi today over here, and Ivan is sitting next to us. Then we have in total, how many work packages? I think 5 or 6 work packages. The first one is the GEOSS Architecture Evolution work package led by USGS and CNR. The second one is the functionality and usability testing work package led by China Radi and CNR as well. Sorry, we have work package 3, which is DMP guidelines and implementation and processing led by ESIP and CODATA. Work package 4, which is a standard interoperability forum led by IEEE. We have a work package on demonstration pilots led by OGC, and we have a work package on community portals led by NOAA. Of course, there is involvement as well of other actors in this activity, in particular the Geo Secretariat, ESA, University of Geneva, and the others. I think I already mentioned them. And the reason why I, let's say, have shown this here is because this initiative has defined what we call a strawman, let's say, vision, let me call it that way, of the GEOSS infrastructures and platform ecosystems. What you see here is in yellow, more or less, an overview what is considered part of GEOSS. I don't want to say actually that the other part is not part of GEOSS, but these are, let's say, activities where the most of the actors are working on, and we are let's say, linking to the other systems that you see outside. No? So you see here that there are different interfaces between the let's say, identified components of this GEOSS infrastructure. No, and in particular, you see that the GEOSS platform is in the middle, interfacing with the regional GEOSS and with the Geo community portals and the Geo flagships at the top. But the GEOSS platform, of course, is as well interfacing directly with the data systems, like as well the regional GEOSS could interface directly with them as well. Anyway, what you can see here is that the GEOSS platform is not doing everything. We have on the right side the thematic international federation system. On the left side, we have the open analysis data ready infrastructures like data cubes and big data analytic systems. So we are still considering that this GEOSS platform is functioning as a connector. No? So it's not, let's say, that everything is part of this GEOSS platform. Examples of the thematic and international federation systems are, of course, the UNEP system, World Meteorological Organization, GEOSS. Examples of the open analysis ready data infrastructures are, for example, Copernicus DIASys, the European Open Science Cloud, but also Earth Server, e-sensing, the Swiss Data Cube, and the Australian Data Cube, and other data cubes, of course. And yes, of course, examples of the regional GEOSs are AmeriGEOS, EuroGEOS, ANO GEOS, and AfriGEOS. And here we mentioned as well that, of course, the GEOSS platform is co-funded by the European Commission and with a grant to ESA in this case, and subcontractor CNR and Eversys. Okay. I didn't want to go through the, let's say, conclusions. I think that can be done later on. The contact still for the GEOSS platform is the Geo Secretariat, and as well for the GEOSS Evolve activities. This might change with the let's say, with the issue of the new work program. As I mentioned, one of our colleagues is Christoph Waldmann. He would like to illustrate a bit on how the GEOSS platform has been used in the context of the Atlantos project. Yes, please.
Thank you, Joost, for the introduction and for the invitation. I very much appreciate being here and would like to share my views on, in a specific example, how GEOSS can be used in the framework of ocean observations. What you see here is the name of a project, Atlantos. This has been funded by the European Commission, a 4-year project with 20 million of budget. It is still running, and there will be follow-ups to that. And also you see here Ocean Data Information System. This is something that does not exist right now. You will see a web page showing something, but it's still work in progress. Okay, so what's Atlantos all about? The idea was to bring both sides of the Atlantic together, the European side and American side. And so both are operating observation systems. And so the idea is to share the knowledge and share experience. Oops, this was done by itself, okay. And so the idea also was to get GEOSS involved as an aggregator. And so we want to make use of the GEOSS portal to facilitate the integration of the data. And we also can use this opportunity to present us as a community. So the GEOSS can have a very strong role in that. So, and that's what we start to work on. If I come back to how I see the role of GEOSS, it's the only global integrator of environmental data. And so you can imagine, or if you talk to colleagues, you will realize there's always this idea to come up with an integrator, maybe even competition to GEOSS. I had those discussions as well. And I think people are completely underestimating the complexity of such an endeavor. So we feel that the ocean world should be part, it does it by itself, sorry, should be part of GEOSS, and I think a lot of ideas had been worked on and so implemented, so it's a fantastic opportunity. So for us, it's a way to go ahead. And so what we made use is the community portal idea that Joost just introduced to us. So a specific example on how to bring these different data providers together. And it finally ended up in this community page. So it's what we made use of this GeoDAP, something that I think Stefan Nativi has been instrumental in. So without that, I think it would be a huge endeavor, which probably would end nowhere. So it was actually more or less we just interchanged data catalogs, and then we ended up with this community page. So this is already showing what has been achieved within GEOSS. The instruments are there. Now it has to be filled with contents, and that's what we are working on. It's not just data. We are talking about data services, and that has to be made available. And, if we think again of the ocean community, and if you try to figure out what type of services are they offering, sure enough, you can learn something about wave heights. You can probably expect services in regard to tides. But as soon as you go into more complex topics, like this morning, G-bone has been mentioned, think about you want to make any predictions on the ecosystem, how it evolves, or harmful algal blooms. This is very difficult and almost impossible at the moment. There will be change, hopefully. Anyway, what I wanted to bring up in my presentation also is the relationship between the ocean science community and the meteorological community. This is very important to understand because they are closely linked. And what I just mentioned, wave heights or tides, this is something that WMO, World Meteorological Organization, is very much interested in. And therefore, IOC, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, and WMO are operating organizations together, which is GEOSS and the World Climate Research Program, so on. So there are linkages between these two communities already. So what does it mean for these both communities? They have to harmonize their procedures. And thinking about IOC and WMO, WMO is very much oriented towards services, and they have to enhance it even. So what will happen in the next future is that WMO will restructure their organization to have a more service-oriented approach. And so IOC has to follow, or they fall behind. And that's a very important aspect that everyone should keep in mind. And so this is all has an impact on the landscape and how you can integrate these two organizations or initiatives into GEOSS as well. Okay. The plan is, so the WMO is ahead of us. I'm from Ocean Science Community. And they already have this weather information established. I mentioned Ocean Data Information System. This is not there. There's nothing that's comparable to Weather Information System. And as you know, this is a global service, and it has regional aspects as well. So in the next stage, the so-called WIS 2.0 will be established. And certain type of principles have been introduced, like you see here, heavy use of web services. We heard this tomorrow as well, and this connected with standardized services and cloud services and so on. So this will be converted into criteria for certification. In the end, WMO will ask for certification of all data providers, something that we should keep in our mind as well. This is also connected not just with services, but with data quality as well. And I want to remind people of the GEO label, which has been discussed 10 years ago. Okay, so here, big data, as soon as you hear about big data, it's zero for me, it means zero download. I learned this morning, and I think that's exactly the idea behind. please do the data reduction inside the cloud and then download just the type of products that you are really interested in, not try to do this on your own resources. So I can fully support this zero download idea. And we also heard about open standard protocols and the connection to commercial search engines. This is not that we will want to fully rely on that, but we want to make use of these services offered by commercial entities. So I think that's also WMO would like to go that way, no longer the centralized approach that they do all by themselves. Okay, so this is my final slide, and it just shows Atlantis and GEOSS. GEOSS is a global ocean observing system. It's an IOC WMO institution, support from both sides. So even if Atlantis will stop, there will be follow-up projects, but GEOSS will remain. You know that there are certain type of services from the oceans that have to remain and play an important role within WMO. But what I would like to suggest is build up stronger links to GEOSS data and services. And this will help us to bring these fragmented ocean community together, what we heard today on the regional scale and on the global scale. And I think we made a first step with Atlantis, and I would like to thank everyone from Atlantis platform infrastructure to help us with that. So, thank you very much.
So the floor is open to questions, I would say. So if there are questions, I mean, there's a whole group of people here who could respond to your questions. Please. I don't know if it's on Slido, Stephen, the questions. Session 2 on Slido. So you could as well either ask questions on Slido or here live. Thank you.
Maybe I can start to ask a question. All right, okay. You know, during the coffee break, I was talking with Joost about some aspects. And so I also would like to know a little bit also from the auditorium how people are seeing the role of GEOSS in this very complex framework. You know, there's an infrastructure being built up and there are other infrastructure that are also established. And so how can we identify a specific role for GEOSS? Made my point during my presentation, but maybe other people have other ideas. So that's a question to the auditorium or the panel.
Does someone want to react?
Well, I mean, I can I can try to provide my view. This is my personal view. Of course, yeah. I mean, I think that Geo, as Joost has explained beautifully, has gone through quite an evolution in the past 12 years, because Geo started more than 10 years ago, and this is another important point. Also, our colleague from NASA, you know, today stress this very important point. If you want to last, and in climate change, in global changes, we must develop something which is lasting for, you know, decades. Then you must be viable. You must be ready to change, you know. So that's an important lesson that GEOSS has learned. And in this present era, we are living, you know, in a very interesting situation where we have the private sector and the web, the big web companies, you know, entering into this area, which is a fantastic opportunity, of course, for us. But on the other side, I think that still there are some scientific needs, and you, Christoph, stress how still there is the need to, let's say, allow flexibility and certain diversity, degree. So the challenge, I guess, for Geo and GEOSS in the next years is how to combine this very diverse landscape where we have big actors coming from the digital transformation, the big web companies, but also still trying to include, as Gilberto said, in a very co-design and co-development way, also the scientific side, and so some local needs. Also, our colleagues from Africa, stress that still there are diverse business models there, and we cannot just use the cloud. So I guess that for GEOSS this is a challenge. This is an opportunity to serve, to continue serving, a very heterogeneous community, and as just said, providing this sort of connecting glue or connecting middleware.
So there are a number of questions starting to come in on Slack. This one says Joost, so I'm going to post it to you. How do you see the future of the knowledge base building in GEOSS in terms of community integrations, artificial intelligence, harvesting?
I think that's one of the slides I presented was that indeed we are moving towards discovery, access, and use of data, information, and knowledge. I believe that, like with data, there will be not just one knowledge base out there. There will be different implementations, and I really believe that via GEOSS you should be able to discover, access, and use the knowledge from the different databases. So I would really favor, let's say, that GEOSS would build, again, connectors, define standards, or let's say not define standards, but recognizes standards that, let's say, can be used to be considered GEOSS interoperable. And this way as well, others could build, let's say, connectors in a way that your knowledge can be, let's say, shared with others. And yes, I mean, there might be a need, let's say, for targeted actions for different communities, depending on the type of knowledge that is needed, actually. And we have seen, for example, that activity working together with the Geo Essential project and with the Eco Potential project, actually, that there are very specific actions needed there. Regarding the harvesting, yes, if you expose as a knowledge base recognized APIs, standards, then this could be, let's say, more easily, of course, accessed as well by any user community. Again, I mean, a platform like the GEOSS platform could make available as well connectors so that we expose as well different types of APIs towards the user communities. So this does not need to be implemented by each and every knowledge provider. And this is the same concept, what I see actually for data. Regarding AI, yes, AI is something that can be used, of course, for generating knowledge by processing, let's say, large quantities of data. So I don't know if this answers the question. I don't know if someone else would like to react. Paolo.
Well, I have 3 or 4 questions, so try and keep your answers a bit shorter if you can.
No, I basically agree with what Joost said. I think that What is important in moving from data to knowledge is that we need some clear scenarios of usage. Because when you move from data to knowledge, you have to be more focused on what actually the users needs. And what is important is to consider that moving from data and information to knowledge has to do with providing information in terms of justification. That is why this information should be considered knowledge. This means that you have to provide clear information about the reliability of the information, which has to do with quality, and with the process used for generating knowledge, which means also sharing, for example, code. And this is something that we have to address.
Can you put your microphone off? Thank you. So on the user question, there's a related question from Mikko Stralendorf from Finland that says, how do we engage the large public user sector? For example, building permit monitoring, water use, etc., are local public duties that are monitored by thousands and performed by thousands of officials.
Well, it's a very good question. It's a good question for many communities. And one of the premises of the current strategic plan is to engage the stakeholders to better understand what their requirements are, so you, in fact, can deliver solutions required to meet those needs. And that's a heavy lift or a pretty significant effort. And it really requires face-to-face engagement. I mean, the technology is great, but I truly believe you still have to have the interaction with those users and have those conversations to better understand what they're trying to accomplish, what problems they're trying to solve. And we've seen examples of this throughout the processes within GEOSS with various communities, whether it's been in the ocean community or in the regional level with the MeriGEOSS and EuroGEOSS. Things have worked well when we've had that engagement with the stakeholders and had conversations. So as great as we like to be enamored by our technology, we truly believe you have to have that human interaction to make this work.
So in terms of interaction, how does the GEOSS platform interact with commercial sector participants in data supply, distribution and analysis? Two examples are given: cloud platform providers and commercial EO services. Yep. So how does the GEOSS platform interact with the commercial sector in terms of data supply, distribution and analysis?
Well, I mean, this is an interoperability question. I mean, how the GEOSS platform is interoperable or is planning to be interoperable in the next future with the private platforms or cyber infrastructure. And the answer is that we don't have just, two options, to be interoperable or not to be interoperable. Depends at which level of interoperability you want to stay. So up to now, let's say, interoperability was mainly achieved by exchanging data. So downloading, uploading, data. And of course, I mean, this is not anymore wise if you have to download and upload big data. So now we have started, working at another level of interoperability, which is called analysis-ready data. So you don't want anymore to, download or upload data, but you want to download or upload your code or your workflow. Okay? So I guess that this is the interoperability level. Unfortunately, in several cases, this is not possible today because, if you want to upload your code, of course, you can do it with some constraints, such as use this particular programming language or meta language. But, if you want to download, you can do only with, several constraints, and you cannot generally, download more than a very specific product. So I guess that we have to work all together, the community, in order not just to open data, but also to open the code, to open algorithms, to open, workflow. So I guess that this is the next step in terms of interaction and interoperability.
And could I just ask for some qualification, because I know Esri, Mapbox, Digital Globe, some of them are already somehow linked to the GEOSS platform. Can you just explain how those private sector firms are already involved?
The question was on what?
So I know that there are already a number of private sector organisations working with the GEOSS platform. This is not a new thing. So can you just explain kind of what's already happening and who's already involved?
Typically, the current activities with private sector is on interoperability with their systems, in particular with the opening of the platform with the APIs, is in interacting with the different platforms through this application programming interface. That basically was one of the main changes in the last years, because it allowed to open the use of the platform to other developers, and also to connect the platform to other providers through APIs.
Thank you. So could you put your mic off, please? Okay. This is a question for Atlantos. How do you see services operating within the GEOSS ecosystem?
This morning we heard about GeoBorn, and there's also a marine initiative that started, I think, 2 years ago, the MBORN. And so in the end, what's happening is that a certain type of systematic framework is adopted by the marine community that has been developed by GeoBorn, and it starts out with the essential biodiversity variables, and then goes on to a certain type of data products that can be derived from that. So this is how I would think Atlantos can benefit from GEOSS, and that's for me also the way ahead. But at the same time, I think the expertise that is existing within the ocean community can also help GEOSS to build a framework that's more easily adaptable to the issues that we have in ocean sciences.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the floor? Okay, if you just say who you are, please.
Okay, Peter from Ghana, and I want the panelists to address some of the issues concerning security and privacy when it comes to using some of these platforms. The usage of data and platform when it comes to security and privacy is very, very key. So I want them to address those issues. Thank you.
I can try to provide you at least one possible answer. I'm sure that there are, at least several possible answers. What I can tell you, I think that of course cybersecurity is a really important challenge for the digital transformation in all the different sectors. And of course, this is going to be more and more important also for us. And here, indeed, we can leverage, in particular, the private development, because they have been active in this area for a longer time than the public, sector. So indeed, this is an issue. But let me also take up your other point, privacy. And when we talk about privacy, more generally, we are talking about trust or ethics, or, similar topics. And in in our view, I mean, from the European Commission point of view, this is another important challenge for the digital transformation, because clearly, since the digitalization, the digital technologies are now present in all the different aspects of our life, we must define certain boundaries or certain principles. So indeed, I guess that this is a challenge also for Geo to extend the present principles, which are mainly, the traditional principles such as open data or, co-design, collaborative participation, etc., etc. I think that one ethic strand or a set of ethical principle might be considered in the next future.
So I'm going to take just a few more of the Slido questions. Are there any more questions from the floor before I wrap up on the session? Okay, so one of the questions is the GEOSS platform going to be further developed? I search, for example, for land cover in Google data search, and I get what I need, but not when I use the GEOSS platform. So I think what that's saying is that, is there still a need for the GEOSS platform when I can go into Google data search, or maybe what's the difference between the two?
I would say the short answer is yes. And we're currently looking at steps to refine that search process, recognizing that it's not perfected at this point. There are a number of things that we're looking at in terms of how to do that better. And one of those has been working with the Google data search tool that's proven to be very effective in refining that search for the user. Again, that's an area of improvement that we're looking at as part of the GEOSS Evolve processes, and that we will continue to build into the new work program. But there's always a need for refinements in any technology, and the search capability is one that we're definitely trying to improve upon.
Okay, so final question, it's a cracker. It's from our friend, Mr. John Masso. And if you're putting questions in, can you please not put acronyms in? Because I don't know what OTOH stands for. So it means I don't know what the, on the other hand. Okay, thank you. On the other hand, OTOH, what's the O for? On the other, oh yeah, okay. So FYI, here is a question from John Masso. And also don't put anonymous. It'd be good to know your name, because then we know where you're coming from. John Masso says, Geo Secretariat has been talking about a knowledge hub. Fine. Is the vision of ESA, JRC, and Gilberto Camara converging? How are we going to be organised?
Discussions are ongoing within what we call an expert advisory group, and that we're trying to seek to come together, and I believe that this is very well possible. I can as well tell you that we recently had a telco together with people from INPE working on the implementation of the Knowledge Hub, and I believe that we made progress in coming up with a shared vision. So I really believe that we will get there where we would like to come. I don't believe that there is really a difference in opinion or vision where we would like to end up. I mean, I believe we all want access to data, services, knowledge. And sometimes, and as well in this case, I believe it's very good to have different opinions regarding, let's say, how to implement this. You get the best results out of that, and I believe that that's the same here as well. So yes, there is for sure, let's say, a positive, let's say, thing ongoing.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists for the last 45 minutes. So now we get a bit more of a gender balance. We welcome Nina to the stage and Lorant. So we're still continuing with the setting the scene. So for this next half hour, Nina, you want to sit here for your? Well, you can sit there if you want. You can go. I don't know how to raise it. So for almost the last 10 years, Nina's been working on web development and more recently on information systems. And she's going to talk about the Space for Water portal, which was launched in 2018. Over to you, Nina.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Nina Kickinger. As I was already introduced, I don't need to go into details, but I'm an Associate Information Systems Officer at the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. And I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you the project I work on, the Space for Water portal, which was launched last year. You can see the URL at the bottom of the page, as well as the UNOOSA social media channels on which we promote news related to the portal, but also other general news on the office. So this slide gives you a short impression of the landing page. I split it in two, so the right part is the bottom part of the home screen. Water conservation and resource management represent some of the most critical environmental issues currently facing humankind, and space technologies and applications play a key role in understanding global water cycles, mapping water courses, and monitoring and mitigating the effects of floods and droughts. The vision of this project is to enable all stakeholders involved in the space and water communities to access data and knowledge, to be creative, and to realize their full potential in contributing to a world in which the availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all has become a reality. My colleague, Mr. Ravan, already gave you some background information on the agreement between UNOOSA and the Prince Sultan bin Abdulaziz International Prize for Water to implement this portal. And the two organizations collaborate on promoting the use of space-based technology for increased access to water. The Space for Water portal is a multi-stakeholder platform for interdisciplinary knowledge exchange, making information on space solutions and technologies for water-related topics discoverable and filterable. It's a capacity-building platform and a portal for expert communities, including those from developing countries. Here I'd like to give you a short overview of the resources and functionality that we provide on the portal, but you'll see more about that later on in a live demonstration. The Space for Water portal has stakeholders. At this point, we have 26 stakeholders who can share information on the software and tools they develop, on the projects they implement. They can share training material or general information about the training platform they would like to contribute. They can share publications, events, and then we also have a section with articles and stories. Those are mostly, but not solely, contributed by volunteers, not the stakeholders necessarily, but we encourage stakeholders to share those as well. We also try to focus more on ontologies, taxonomies, and use them as a means of implementing a glossary at the same time, but also for tagging, improving our search, and for probably integrating semantic web technologies in the future. So I'll go ahead and give you a live demonstration now. This is the landing page. If you scroll down a bit, here we have a section on upcoming or recent events. We can see the Geodata Technology Workshop here as well. events can be shared by stakeholders, but we'll also do research on relevant events so the community gets updated on what's going on. And then can you slowly scroll through? Here you'd see most recent news and stories that were shared, and most important sections of the portal featured. We briefly went over the categories of this content. Scroll more down, please. More. And yeah, the most important sections are teased, and here we have the SDGs as well. So content is tagged by SDGs and indicators and targets. And if you click, for instance, on SDG 6, you can see we provide some general information on that. And at the bottom, you would see all the content that has been tagged with it. We will go into more depth with that, also providing related content on indicators. So far, this is at an SDG level. But if you go to the target page, you will get all the content that has been tagged with that as well. So maybe you can scroll up again to the menu, and I'll quickly show you the stakeholders landing page or section page. And we have 26 stakeholders here. If you filter for international organization, I can show you an example. I'll not show any one state, even though it's public, but let's use the one of UNOOSA, of the Office of Outer Space Affairs. Every stakeholder shares different information, but you as a potential stakeholder, you can have a profile page there that describes you and what you do, and below you can share your social media channels and contact information, but also the resources you share get listed here, and people can become aware of your contributions to these communities of practice of space technologies and water research. Another example that we could show, for instance, would be a piece of software, let's say the Geodata portal. GEOSS is a stakeholder, so maybe we can show you that. So here's a general information with, like, you can add videos, you can add the information you would like to share. It's up to the stakeholder who submits it. Ideally, there'd be training material also related to the software, and yeah, functionality tagging. But that's a difficult thing to implement because everyone would like their software to feature all the features. Let me show you now, like, the training material, for instance, a massive open online course that we have. Yeah, click on this, please. Thank you. So training courses can be provided. Sometimes there'll be more information on top here if there's a start date and end date and certificates are available or so. Some have less. If you scroll down, you'd see like scroll down, please. You'd see the introductory video to that course and a description, and you can either contribute an entire training manual, or if you prefer just to share the link and some very basic information, you can click on Take the Class Online at the top and bottom of the page, and you will get redirected. No need to click now. Okay. I would say I stop this demo here, but I'd invite you to go to the portal and check it out yourself. And let's get back to the slides, please. So our target audience are professionals active in the space technologies and water sector, but also the interested general public. And UNOOSA would like to create a space for interdisciplinary knowledge exchange and not just another catalog portal. And for this reason, we need to elicit users' requirements while taking into account their busy work lives. No one likes to fill in the forms, so we need to find ways how we could do it with less efforts spent in filling forms. So we look forward to learning about your requirements, and we really would like to find out who are our users, how are they working, what are the problems they face, and what features are really beneficial to a community that should be provided on such a portal. To refine the functionality, we'll continue to collect user requirements at conferences and workshops, and also via online surveys. And I created one that only takes about 3 minutes once you've had an impression of the portal. I'd invite you to go to www.menti.com and enter the code 931871. It's just 4 questions, I think, so it should be rather quick to fill it. I kept it short. Yeah, next slide, please. In the upcoming month, we will focus the development on a few features, such as the Meet a Professional feature, where distinguished experts are introduced by means of a biography and interviews, maybe a photo and some contact details if they want to share that. We'll improve our taxonomies and ontologies and also the glossary. We want to build actors' capacities on standards. We would like to do capacity building. OGC is one of the stakeholders of the portal, so we look forward to promoting more of their training material and of their resources. We consider this as really important. And as we don't want to reinvent the wheel, we would like to provide our users with a dataset search with the using the GEOSS widget, search widget. And once a new version has been published, we'll work on the integration of a dataset search on the Space for Water portal. Okay, next slide, please. So questions that remain open are how to minimize the administrative efforts for stakeholders contributing contents, and how we can best facilitate the exchange of information on upcoming events and conferences, on news, on metadata, not the geographic data, but metadata on like the stakeholder profiles themselves, or on projects and software and training material. We'll look into standards that are existing, but also it would mean that stakeholders would have to provide the data in a standardized format in a way. Okay, slide please. Oh, sorry. So if you would like to get involved, be it in writing an article or becoming a stakeholder, contributing resources, or even in becoming a donor, for those who would consider that, I'd cordially invite you to reach out to me during the coffee breaks. We're also looking for experts who would be willing to work with us on content review and quality control. Another announcement I would like to make is that UNOOSA is currently looking for a host institution for the 5th International Conference on Space Technologies for Water Management. If any one of you has ideas of like a potential host institution, would be grateful to collaborate on this. And yeah, that's it. I would like to thank you for your attention. Please have a look at the Space for Water portal. You see the link here. You can get in touch with me either in person here during the workshop or via email. And I would like to invite you also to take this very short survey. We need your user requirements to improve the portal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nina. Are there any immediate questions for Nina? Please bear in mind that session 2 Slido is still valid for these 2 presentations as well. If you could just say who you are, please.
Yes, my name is Jean from Brazil. My question is that how, here. Yeah, so I see that you have a regional focus on this. How the regions on special developing words being represented at the portal at this moment, or thank you.
At this moment, I have to admit that the thematic focus and regional focus pages have not been developed to a very satisfactory extent, but the idea is to provide different lenses on the content. So under the resources section, you'll find a lot of content, and the thematic focus will be based on tags and keywords that are considered as important at certain times, that are of key interest, and the regions. At this point, it's just like a geopolitical map. It's just the countries, but I would like to improve like the mapping in general on this page, and also to support climate regions and other regions that you could switch between then and look at the same data that is provided under resources, including the stakeholders though, through the lens of a map and through like filtering based on a geographic region or climate region or any other region that we can then implement by means of a map. But did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So I had a question. You talked about doing work with OGC. When you were talking about ontologies and taxonomies, you talked about semantic web integration. Can you just expand a bit more on what you're doing, if that's something you're doing with the standards bodies, or what you mean by that?
So far, we've not really started with that, but I consider it as an important element to share our information in a way that others could query it as well. I participated at the hydrology domain working group at WMO and had an interesting exchange with experts there from OGC and from WMO. And yeah, I would like to, on the one hand, make our data more explorable through these technologies, and on the other hand, take advantage of, for instance, ontologies that have been developed by experts, so we don't need to redo this. At this point, our taxonomies have about 400 terms only. We developed one on space technologies. That would be one that we could probably share and contribute to the community. But in terms of hydrology, the office's resources are limited, I would say, so we could benefit from data shared via ontologies by other organizations.
Thank you. And I guess that GEOSS and ESA and others would be interested in the space technologies one. I have one other question. You talked about interdisciplinary knowledge exchange, and in the example of SDG 6 and the other SDGs, how do you work with the custodian agencies? Do you work with the custodian agencies?
We contact several organizations and invite them to become members or stakeholders to the portal to share their content and partner up. But since it was launched end of October last year, and I'm working part-time, I'm the portal developer and responsible for the content at the office. And so, yeah, time is limited and we're doing our best. But yeah, we would like to invite everyone to have a dialogue on reaching probably similar goals. And yeah, we don't want to duplicate the work, but rather showcase what others have already been doing very well.
I should also add, Nina has been one of the co-organisers of this event in her spare time as well. So quite a lot going on. So thank you. Okay, so now we will move on to someone who knows this building quite well, arguably one of the leading geospatial experts at UNOOSA over the last while, who has now moved, and I'm doing all this without reading my notes, who has now moved to the UN Population Fund and is working on a project, which you can correct me, is it Grid Cubed? It's Grid 3. Oh, it's Grid 3. Okay, so over to you, Laurent, to talk about Grid 3.
Thank you. How much time do I have? Okay, thank you. maybe I should also add what Nina didn't say, custodian agencies can also reach out. It has to be a two-way communication always. Thank you very much. So, I mean, we heard this morning from Gilberto and then from Shirish also on use cases, on how Earth observation data is used, how it is important in various domains, in various application areas for the global frameworks that Shirish mentioned. So I think with my presentation, I will be just trying to make a case for what they already said, and then show you one example where Earth observation data and accessibility, availability, open access to such data is very important in a lot of other areas of work and in what we do. So what is Grid 3 in a way? It's an initiative that, as you will see, is implemented by a number of partners in developing better quality, higher resolution population data, demographic data around the world. And it started with a number of initiatives in the past, one namely to eradicate polio in Nigeria, another one, a collaboration between my organization, the UN Population Fund, and World Pop Flowminder team in Afghanistan, where the last census was in 1979, and there was no way to know where people live, where population lives, and we needed to find a way to do that. So these were the precursors, in a way, to the project when it was realized that such work and as you'll see, the modeling approach and looking at Earth observation and other data to generate population estimates is useful in many cases in many countries. So what's our vision is to map a path to sustainable development for everyone. And how are we trying to do that is through generation of high resolution population estimates, to supporting the census planning and census exercise, through comprehensive settlement mapping, mapping infrastructure, but also building capacity at the country level, and also assisting in harmonizing subnational boundaries. As I mentioned, census is, of course, the most important exercise in identifying where population lives and the structure and in a way, details, attributes of that population in every country. But as you will see on the map, although in most countries that census took place maybe in the last 10, 15 years, there are many countries, especially those in red, orange, or blue that you see there, where census was maybe 15, 20, 30 years ago. And some of them are quite large countries with big increases in population, and there's no way to know where those people live today. So that's where such projects are necessary to fill those gaps. Even in these other countries where you see the census took place in the last 10, 15 years, most of the time it was done on paper. And it's the first time now in this round that we are doing it in a georeference way. We are doing it in a using geospatial and let's say satellite imaging to support, to aid the census. For many countries in the world, it's the first time that this is done. And this is where it's very important that the international organizations support that as much as possible. So our work is, in a way, within the project, is to build spatial data solutions that make development goals achievable, as I will point that out later. Currently, we are working in 5 African countries. You see them on the map. These are the countries where we identified the most important need in starting the project. We started about a year ago. Of course, there's a lot of other candidate countries that are coming and requesting similar support. As you can imagine, in many conflict areas, in many countries, the next census, even if it will take place in the next years, it will not be able to reach all areas because of instability, because of conflict. And in those countries as well, support from such solutions and technologies will be key in making sure that population is identified and mapped properly. So that idea that no one is left behind, as you see it so many times also in the 2030 agenda, is truly addressed. So the partners within the project are, of course, first of all, our donors, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the UK aid agency DFID. The implementing partners are the WorldPop group at the University of Southampton, who are experts in population modeling, and the FlowMinder Foundation, my own organization, UNFPA, and the coordinating partner is the CIESIN, the Center for International Earth Science Information Network at Columbia University, and Bob Chen, the director, is here, so I'm sure he will talk more about these things in his presentation in the afternoon. The Southampton-based WorldPop group is, as I said, an expert in population modeling and mapping, and it's partnering with the FlowMinder organization, who's also using other technologies, mobile phone data and other such data to address, to map and to address issues related to vulnerable populations. UNFPA, our own mandate is broad. We are also custodians to some of the SDG and the indicators, and I'm not going into details on that, but we have a strong role in also supporting census activities around the world. So that is how we came into this project as partners. And of course, CIESIN is also well known and has a long-standing experience in population mapping, population modeling, and in general in understanding of human interactions with the environment. What is the approach of the project? First, we identify those opportunities. We look at where the gaps need to be filled, where are the strong use case potentials. We also look at the potential for open data networks and frameworks to exist. We prefer to work in countries where that is not an issue or it can be addressed. And of course, we look at the commitment to achieve the SDGs also on behalf of those countries that we are partnering with. We work definitely at a national level with partners to develop tailor-made strategies for the specifics of the country, from the identifying needs to the collection and production of the data we talk about, to sharing, to using that data for different use cases, different applications, and in improving capacity and then creating those partnerships to enable all this to work well. As I said, we generate through the project accurate settlement data, more precise boundary data, mainly high-resolution population distribution, population estimates, mostly through modeling, obviously in areas where census is not an option or it's old. And then, of course, looking at infrastructure mapping as well. And the application areas, as you can see, are many, not only in supporting the census exercise itself, but in also informing service delivery, investments, supporting humanitarian operations, and last but not least, mapping and disaggregating the SDG indicators as detailed as possible. So, as I mentioned in summary, high-resolution population maps, settlement, subnational boundaries, infrastructure mapping. This is what the project is aiming to produce. As you will see, and as you can already see here on these slides, a lot of this data production is dependent on availability of high-resolution and updated Earth observation imagery. And this is where our interest is in working with organizations such as GEO and in making sure that the data access and the online services built on those data are easily, quickly available and flexible to address the various needs. When we talk about, of course, population mapping and generating population estimates, ideally we would take the census data and disaggregating it to the grid cells. We are talking about using, of course, imagery and land cover and other data to improve those estimates. But in other cases, as you see in Afghanistan, as I mentioned, if the last census was in 1979, and since then some surveys were done in parts of the country, but not in most of the country, you will need to do modeling, and you will need to use intensively satellite imagery and other data to try and estimate population in those other areas. We use a lot of the Earth observation data also to better map settlements, to delineate them, to identify buildings, and use that data then in improving the population estimation. As I mentioned, cleaning up subnational boundaries, improving editing those boundaries is also important, and very often imagery is used to do that more accurately in our work with the countries. Infrastructure mapping, that's more about collecting data and bringing different data sets together, validating them. That's another area. And then, of course, capacity strengthening, not only in generating and collecting this data at a national level, but also learning how to work with it, putting it to good use in various use cases, and enable wider dissemination. As I mentioned, there's many use cases we are looking at also in the context. It's not only about producing this high quality population data, it's also about seeing how it can benefit the governments, the organizations in the different countries, what they use it for, how we can support them in applying that data in the work they do, learning their lessons. I mean, here are just some examples of how this data supports field operations, supports field needs assessments, empowering also private sector, enhancing the statistical power within those countries. Just some ideas of where the data can apply. One important point I wanted to put up is even within the census planning and in the modeling work that we do, the satellite-derived building footprints are key in how we are mapping and estimating that population, and that's only possible to do now on a country scale in any country, thanks to the availability and the access to the imagery data and to the ability of us using online services to quickly generate products from that data. A few years ago, as one of those who was in this business for some 20 years, this was impossible, this was a dream, and now it's there and you can click a button and you can get access to some of this data. So that's very important. Another example is updating enumeration areas to support census. You need to know exactly how many buildings are in each of those areas, how many people are estimated to be in that area, so each census enumerator can go to those places and not be overwhelmed or surprised on the ground. You do this also using the imagery and those population estimates that I talk about. So this pretty much enables census to be done properly to make sure that the 10 or 20% sometimes in a country that are left out, usually in a census, are found and counted. So that's just some ideas. And here you can see, of course, the country-level impact such a project can have in the health, infrastructure, education, or agriculture domain. I can talk a lot about that alone. But also in the context of the SDG monitoring as the SDG indicator mapping and disaggregation. It's important to mention that 98 of the 232 unique indicators in the SDG framework are demographic and population data related. So for almost half those indicators, we need high quality demographic data, and how we generate, how we produce that data globally is also using these technologies and Earth observation data, as I hope I mentioned and convinced you already. So this is in summary our project. I'm happy to answer any questions. The logo is still Grid Cubed, but we agreed to call it Grid 3, not to sound too geeky. And you have the contact details there for the project and the various social media handles. And hopefully we can talk more about how we can work together on this in the next days while here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. So I see Stefano has a question.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. I was wondering whether you are already in contact with the Geo Human Planet Initiative, because I guess that you are covering, we are trying to address a common challenge here. Thank you.
We are trying, of course, I think the answer was there also before, that we always try to make sure that we know everything that goes on and that we are talking or reaching out to each and every initiative. I mean, I only joined 3.5 months ago. I'm not aware of any previous discussions, but that's why I'm here, to make to raise awareness of the project and to welcome any interaction and discussion. I can't say we had a direct discussion on this with the Human Planet Initiative, but let's do it. Thank you.
I'll take the gentleman over there and then Ethiopia.
Hi, I'm Jens Easterman from Geoterra in South Africa. Are you aware and maybe in contact with Facebook and their efforts to map population in Africa?
Yeah, I think our coordinating partner, CISIN, and maybe Bob will mention that later, they are working directly with Facebook. So the Facebook population mapping exercise is done in collaboration with CISIN, who's also a partner in this project. There are different approaches, but the links are there. And in fact, the whole building footprint extraction let's say, exercise started some 2 years ago or 1.5 years ago when Facebook said, let's apply our face recognition algorithms to satellite imagery and let's try and do this. So these things grew out somehow of such early initiatives. So the connections are there and the partners are in close coordination, I would say. Approaches are different again. What we do is very much bottom up. We work with the countries, we take data from the countries to improve these estimates. It's not only looking at the imagery and trying to guess where population is. It's adding a lot more detail to it. Some of these models can take 3-4 months to develop for that specific country. That's the difference. But we definitely are working together and learning from what others do. Thanks.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. We have been having a big challenge in mapping population, especially in developing some projects like water supply, food security, and so on, because the traditional census is taking more time and a lot of funds are required, and some political issues are also have become difficult to do the traditional census. So, which type of satellite data are you using? Because we try to do it, it has become very expensive in terms of cost. Is there any possibility to collaborate as Ethiopia with you? Thank you.
I have to say that Ethiopia and Tanzania were originally on that map that I showed you, but then somehow the engagement was a bit slower, and that's why we are not actively involved, but that can change at any time. You are right, census is expensive. In South Sudan, a month ago when we were there and discussing with the National Statistics Bureau, they are looking at $100 million to organize it, and it will take them years to raise the funds before they can even get started. So that sometimes is difficult. And this is where these solutions are helping, meanwhile, provide a good enough estimate to work with. I think, in terms of imagery, we use the medium resolution imagery to come up with land use, land cover data that is then used as a covariate in the modeling. We are also using, of course, the higher resolution, more commercial data to do that building footprint detection. But then again, you don't have to buy and download that data. You can just run that algorithm that detects the building footprints for you, and then you get the derived data, and that doesn't mean you have to purchase the satellite imageries. There are solutions to reduce the costs. There are solutions to access online services, subscription services, which are, again, much cheaper than buying and downloading the data. And this is all what we try and use and put to good use and work with the countries, support the countries to have access to that data. So definitely interested in working closer on that with any country who has clear interest in that. Thanks.
Okay, so Lillian, then Stefan, and then I've got a Slido question, then I'll go back to the floor if there's more questions.
My question was actually similar to on the probability of working with other countries such as Kenya, because we are planning to have our national population census this year, and also the agricultural census, for which RCMRD has been consulted in terms of providing such information. But then the issues of costs usually come up, and the plans get stalled at some point. So I was wondering if there are plans to expand to other countries. Thank you.
I mean, just briefly, RCMRD actually supported very well Malawi on the census that was just finalized in 2017, and they did a great job in making sure it's geospatial, as I mentioned. We have identified about 15 countries that are a priority in terms of engagement for us as the project is extending. We are just ending the first year. We are looking at extending the project for another 3 years with the generous support of the donors. So those 15 countries are again identified based on a number of criteria, also based on clearly expressed interest from the countries, but it's still work in progress. So if there's any concrete arguments to add other countries to that list or to have discussions with other countries, by all means, because we want to make sure that we support the process as much as we can, especially in areas where organizing the census is a challenge or costly. We also work closely with FAO, because they organize the agricultural census, and UNFPA closely coordinates with FAO, sometimes in ensuring that the agriculture and the population census are also, using somehow or synergize in terms of use of resources and reduce the cost as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, Lillian, that was my fault for using your name. You are indeed from RCMRD in Kenya, which you just forgot to say. Stefan?
I'm Stefan Fritz from YASA. My question is, do you sometimes find some conflicts with the countries in terms of accepting certain numbers coming out from geospatial and from the remote sensing side versus what they traditionally have done and statistically reported, subnational statistics? Because I know some examples like in northern Kenya where their numerators cannot go because it's not accessible. The population normally tries to inflate some numbers because of allocation of resources. So what is your experience, and what process do you go through to reconcile these sometimes potentially different numbers you get? Thanks.
It's a very good question. I mean, some of the priority countries that I mentioned earlier are exactly Burkina Faso, Burundi, Mali, Niger, exactly countries where census is being prepared, but all areas will not be accessible. It's already known, and they are asking us to support doing so-called hybrid census by identifying those areas and estimating population where access of the enumerators will not be possible. Now, in terms of numbers and disagreements, it's about what I think Ivan mentioned earlier. It's about engaging the stakeholders and working closely with the stakeholders at the country level to also have those numbers accepted. We are always explaining clearly the methodology behind the modeling, the uncertainty, because there is there's a scale there, there's a best estimate, there's a minimum, there's a maximum that we can also provide through the use of this modeling approach that is being done, and working with the country to accept that. So we are not necessarily releasing officially data before there is some acceptance or buy-in from the government. Just 2 weeks ago, we were in Nigeria at a workshop that we organized together with the National Population Commission to exactly present them the data, the estimates that we generated for the country, but making sure that they are accepting the approach and the numbers before we widely use and publicize the data. So it is about engagement, and it's about making sure that they understand the approach, that they can even learn it and apply it themselves later in improving their own estimates and projections, and see how that works. But the questions will always be there, and some countries are still questioning the results of the model. Work in progress, but it's a very good point you raise, and we try to make sure that we work with them closely so that they are not saying this is just pushed on us from above or from somewhere outside the country.
So I'm going to merge two questions from Slido. One is from Tom Butler, and he says, is Grid 3 data available via a public web service or cloud-hosted data? And sort of related from Gilberto Camara is, how to make Grid 3 a fair resource, findable, etc., all that stuff, so that a number of people can reuse the methods.
I think the clear goal of the project is that any data that is generated is publicly available, and the countries we work with have to accept that also for us to engage in the country. As I think I mentioned in one of the slides. So yes, the data is publicly available. We are looking at, right now there are some applications developed to access the data online to be able to click on any of those 100-meter grid cells and access population structure, age, sex, pyramids, everything. Now, this is not necessarily a web map service, not an OGC map service yet, but that can be also developed, and we are working on making sure that the data is available through various types of online services. As to Gilberto's question, I think what we try to do is expose as much as possible the countries we work with and also other potential countries to the modeling approach, to how it's done, helping them access the data they need, and ultimately enabling them to do it themselves. So this is where we go, and in fact, the modelers would argue this is a complicated process, and it's not a one-week workshop. We agreed that if it takes a month, we will take a month and train the experts in the statistical offices to be able to understand and use it themselves going forward. So by that, I hope we want it to be a fair and accessible resource. And the whole approach should be well-known and accessible to anyone who wants to use it.
Thank you. So we just have another 5 to 10 minutes before we're going to wrap up for lunch. Are there any final questions or interventions? I can see Bob sort of. Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Stephen and Lorant. And I'll talk a little more about this after lunch, but I'm glad you brought up some of the issues. I think just to give a little context, there are a number of efforts, including Geo Human Planet, which is really working, I would say, from the global scale down. Grid 3 is very specifically working from the country level up, and I think those are both very complementary and important efforts to work both ends of the issue and take advantage of the fact that the data, well, the problems and the data actually exist at both scales and need to be coordinated both within countries across SDGs and across countries because of the international comparison, and from the regional to global scale because of all the issues that I think everyone in this room is familiar with. So you may detect some of the same words being used, but I think we're trying to do our best to coordinate all the different stakeholders in the process.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, that's a good point. And maybe one point I forgot to mention, it, maybe it's one of the most important ones. We are talking about 100-meter grid here. So it's a very, very detailed population estimate data set that we are developing, which is something that, years ago, even in the context of our UN work, where we realized population data is key to a lot of the different work areas we are engaged with, was just a dream to have such accurate and high resolution population data available. So that's where the bottom-up approach, as Bob also mentioned, is also important to be even more accurate using the different surveys and other data that we find in the country. And of course, there's other initiatives generating global settlement data and layers from satellite imagery. As you all know, the European Commission, the global the human settlements layer, the global urban footprint that the German Space Agency has been working with. All those we in fact look at and use as additional data that helps us refine the output in the end of what we are trying to do. So these collaborations and these partnerships are very important.
Gilberto?
Yes, just talking of which, I would suggest that you consider that submitting Grid 3 as what we call a community activity of GEO. We would welcome your effort. We think it would be enough of interesting and different approach and very much down to earth in the best sense of that word to be a part of our community.
Thank you very much for that suggestion. I think Bob heard it, I heard it, so we'll work on it. Thank you very much.
Okay, I don't see any more hands, so final round of applause, please, for our last two speakers. So we're going to break for lunch now, and you get back here for 5 to 2. There's another great session this afternoon on data and information needs and challenges, which will be aligned around the GEO engagement priorities. Unfortunately, you get me again. I'm moderating, so please be back at 5 to. Adam, are you here? Mr. Fish? Oh, phew, thank you. Just because you're on stage next. So for lunch, you have to go down to the ground floor, which is called Rotunda, and as you come out the elevator, turn right, okay? You have the newspaper place there, and then you take the next exit. So you're going towards F and G. If I said that quickly in Glaswegian, it doesn't sound very good. So head towards F and G, and it's called the cafeteria. So there's a restaurant and a cafeteria down there, and I hope to see you back here at 5 to 2. Enjoy your lunch. Oh, and please go and speak to the sponsors as usual.